First time I met Jonathan, he was in 7th grade. He loved spending time with his friends, socializing, playing games with his cabin mates. And as a typical 7th grader at camp, Jonathan loved to push back on the grown-ups around him. He liked to revel in every opportunity to stretch the boundaries of curfew, and with his peers even, Jonathan could sometimes be tough too, even at times being seen as a bully. As my fellow camp directors and counselors recall, Jonathan's acting out seemed to communicate something deeper, a struggle that was going on in his life. 4 years later, Jonathan was again assigned to my village at camp, but this time, Jonathan came to camp as Jade. Jade identifies now and then as a transgender woman. She has since gone on to college and law school and has now a notable career of offering legal support to members of the LGBTQ community through Lambda Legal. That summer, though, when she was in 10th grade, Jade told the story of her journey with gender and identity for her peers in the teen village at URJ Camp Newman. She shared how she revealed her identity to camp friends and that close community first. That was the safe place for her. That summer, for the first time, she bunked with all the other female campers and wore, of course, the latest teenage fashions like everybody else, enjoying hanging out with her friends. Best of all, though, she was happy, and the weight of what psychologists and physicians call gender dysphoria was no longer on her shoulders. All of us on staff that summer will never forget what it was like to see someone finally be comfortable in their own skin. Over the last 15 years and more, especially accelerated recently by the changes in social life brought out during the COVID-19 pandemic, we've witnessed progress in our communities, in our country, in the Jewish community, in regards to inclusion of LGBTQ individuals. In summer camps and youth programs, and in some professional spaces too, name tags and introductions begin by sharing one's pronouns. On synagogue membership forms, on school applications, gender now often appears open-ended, rather than making the assumption that each person would fall into a binary, either male or female. In spite of these signs of progress and of gender inclusion and LGBTQ rights becoming more mainstream, many youth and teens in our country are still in crisis. In the recent Trevor Project survey of over 28,000 LGBTQ young people ages 13 through 24, 41% of them considered suicide within the year 2023. Only 1/2 of those surveyed found that their school was a place that affirmed who they are and felt safe to them. For many of us who grew up in the latter half of the 20th century, this subject feels new and more approach the fluidity, and this idea of a more open approach to the fluidity of one's gender identity isn't second nature as it is for the youth and teens growing up today. There is a great difference and distinction between what young people are experiencing in our lives and what we see on the public stage in our country. It's no wonder that this remains the case when our leaders in public send a bill like House Bill 68 to the governor's desk in Ohio, a bill that would prevent gender-affirming care for young people. But in Judaism, our commitment to one's safety and health in life is central and core to who we are. And our awareness of what it is to live beyond the binary is actually not new to the human condition. The need to be one's authentic self and to have others see you for who you are is as old in Judaism as the Garden of Eden. In the text of the Mishnah and Talmud from the 2nd century on, we have a written record in Judaism of a recognition of a spectrum of gender identities. These texts identify at least 6 different expressions of gender. Zachar and nekeva, the traditional Hebrew terms for male and female. Androgynous and tumtum, representing experiences of intersex individuals, those whose physical form at birth was not clearly identifiable as either male or female. According to Brown University, 1 in every 1,500 to 2,000 people are born intersex. That's about a quarter of the number of redheads that exist in the world, just to put it into perspective. And the Mishnah also describes Elonit and Saris, terms that individuals identified as male or female at birth, who then develop opposite gender identities as they grow up through puberty. 6 different gender expressions. The sages of our tradition expressed a commitment to a religiously fulfilling life for individuals in all of these expressions. But we shouldn't assume that recognition also ensured treatment that honored every individual's needs outside of the bounds of the mitzvot, of the commandments. We must own that our sacred texts, and for many centuries in Jewish life, status and privilege have remained correlated with one gender. Most clergy and leaders for years were male. In some communities, they still are. Heads of household, male. The older, prominent authors of Jewish philosophy, theology, and history, male. But regardless of this bias, the value of knowing and seeing oneself and one another as sacred creations made in God's image, that is who we are as Jewish people. In this week's Torah reading, Parshat Vayigash, Joseph shows us the raw depth of emotion behind the need to live out one's authentic identity. Joseph's brothers, who had come down to Egypt in search of food during the famine, they refused to return to Canaan when Joseph, who appears unrecognizable to them in his role as a top Egyptian advisor, he holds Benjamin, his brother, captive for stealing. In their final confrontation, Joseph decides to reveal his true identity to them. As the Torah reads, Velo yachol Yosef lehitapek. It was not possible for Joseph to hold back. As he removes his Egyptian garb, he cries out. His sobs were so loud that the Egyptians could hear, and the news reached Pharaoh's palace. The idea of lehitapek, the Hebrew word, is related by the root to another Hebrew word, afik, which is a channel or a dam that directs water. It's different to think about a dam that holds something back versus a channel that allows for water to permeate and move in different directions. Sort of like the leadership or teacher identity of be a channel, not a dam. How many of us have been in a situation where we could not hold back the truth about how we feel, or a value we hold dear, or an opinion to which we cleave? Now multiply that feeling times thousands. Imagine holding back your true identity of who you are, the core of who you are each morning, the roots of who you are in your soul. That feeling is the essence of Joseph's primal cry, the cry that reached Pharaoh in his palace. That's a symbolism that we can't overlook, because we know from later chapters of the Torah what it takes to truly reach Pharaoh in his palace. We can honor the teaching in Joseph's emotions and his giving in to his truth here in our day too, by seeking to learn about people's different paths and experiences in identity, rather than by judging them by their appearance, by approaching each person in our community, vehine, behold what you are, who you are as a sacred creation of God, by being aware of new possibilities for what each of our identities might become in our lives one day, by asking people how they want to be called rather than by misgendering them, and by apologizing when we no doubtedly mistake and use the wrong word. By being open to hearing new words, new terms, new customs for meeting one another, by using pronouns and not being afraid of that, and by moving eagerly to incorporate them into our everyday speech. In this way, like Joseph's raw and inspiring authenticity, we invite the sacred expressions of the humanity and the majesty of our Creator into our lives, by not holding back in our capacity for empathy. I often think back to the transition of my camper, Jade, the one that she experienced over 4 summers of Jewish camp. I'm not so sure that we knew the value then of what it meant for her to have the support of a community that didn't hold back in their sense of acceptance and welcoming and inclusion. Embracing those around us of any identity and standing beside them through their transition in life or their discovery of their identity is truly a sacred privilege. And at the same time, to not hold back in our advocacy of anyone oppressed in our community. That is the energy and authenticity we need in this sanctuary. May we all find our place of openness and compassion at the entrance of this sacred place for all of the sacred beings in this place, where we can lift our eyes to one another to see and to learn. Shabbat Shalom.